So let me tell you about the night Gloria Weber almost lost everything. Her company, her freedom, and honestly, her life. And how a quiet waiter with callous hands and a secret the size of a classified government file was the only thing standing between her and people who've been planning her destruction for 18 months. You think you know how this kind of story goes. Rich woman, wrong man, big mistake. But stay with me. Because the man who saved her was not who she thought he was. And neither was the man who was supposed to be impressing her over a $40 glass of wine. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far our stories reach and how they resonate across the globe. Gloria Weber did not go on many blind dates. Not because she lacked the time, though she absolutely lacked the time, but because she had learned, somewhere around her 30th birthday, that most people who wanted to spend an evening with her were not actually interested in her. They were interested in what she ran. Weber Global Logistics was worth $3.2 billion at last count, and that number had a way of making Gloria the most fascinating woman in any room, even when she was eating cold noodles alone at her desk at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. But her assistant, Priya, had been persistent. He's smart, Priya had said. He's successful. He's in finance. You like him. And Gloria, who had been working 70-hour weeks for 6 months straight and could not remember the last time she had laughed at something that was not a quarterly earnings report, had said yes. She had told herself it was just dinner. 2 hours. Maybe one glass of wine. She could survive anything for 2 hours. She could not have been more wrong about that. The restaurant was called Maison Delacroix, which was a kind of name that told you two things immediately. The food was excellent, and the bill would make your eyes water. It sat on the corner of Whitmore and Fifth, all dark with paneling and low lighting and the faint smell of expensive candles. Gloria had been there twice before for client dinners. She knew the maitre d' by name. She had a preferred table in the far corner away from the windows, where she could sit with her back to the wall and see the entire room. Old habit. She had started doing it 3 years ago after a competitor sent a photographer to a restaurant where she was having a private meeting. Now she always sat where no one could approach her from behind. Julian Marsh was already at the table when she arrived. That was the first thing she noticed. Not that he was handsome. He was, in a forgettable sort of way, the kind of good-looking that comes from expensive haircuts and regular gym visits rather than anything God had particularly contributed. Not that he was well-dressed. He was dark suit, no tie, the casual confidence of someone who had never had to wonder whether he belonged somewhere. No. The first thing Gloria noticed was that he was looking at his phone, not glancing at it, not checking a quick message. He was deep in it, scrolling with the focused intensity of someone reading something important, and he did not look up when the maitre d' brought her to the table. He did not look up when she sat down. He looked up approximately 4 seconds after she cleared her throat, and he did it with the mildly irritated expression of someone who had been interrupted. "Gloria," he said. Not a question. He already knew who she was. "Julian," she said back, and smiled a smile she reserved for difficult clients. They ordered drinks. Julian asked for something expensive and specific, the name of which Gloria immediately forgot. She asked for sparkling water. She wanted to keep her head clear. She was not sure why that instinct was firing so strongly, but she had learned a long time ago to listen to it. The first 15 minutes were fine, in the way that a waiting room is fine. Polite. Forgettable. Julian asked about Weber Global in the tone of someone conducting a performance review rather than making conversation. How many countries were they operating in now? Had she considered the Southeast Asian markets? What was her position on the proposed freight regulation changes? Gloria answered everything smoothly, because she always did, but she was also watching him, not because she was attracted to him, because something was off. Julian Marsh had a Wharton education and a VC firm with $900 million under management. According to the background check she had run the moment Priya gave her his name. Yes, she ran background checks on blind dates, and no, she was not going to apologize for that. But he was asking her questions he should already know the answers to. He was asking them like a man gathering information, not like a man trying to impress a woman. He also kept his phone on the table, right there, face up between the breadbasket and his wine glass. It buzzed twice in the first 20 minutes, and both times he glanced at it with an expression Gloria could not quite name. Not eagerness. Not annoyance. Something more deliberate, like he was waiting for a specific message and checking whether it had arrived yet. She filed all of this away and kept smiling. Around the 40-minute mark, Julian excused himself to use the restroom. He took his jacket. He left his phone on the table. Gloria looked at the phone for exactly 2 seconds, then looked away. She was not the kind of person who went through other people's phones. She was also not the kind of person who ignored red flags, and she had now counted at least 4. She had already decided she was leaving. She was going to wait for Julian to come back. Tell him it had been a pleasure, settle her portion of the bill, and go home. She had a 7 a.m. call with her operations team in Singapore and a board presentation to finish. She did not need this. Whatever this was, she did not need it. She was reaching for her purse when the waiter appeared. He had been there all evening, quietly doing his job in a way that good waiters do, which is to say, almost invisibly. She had clocked him the way she clocked everything. Medium height, broad shoulders that sat a little too square for a man in service, dark hair, calm eyes. The kind of still that was not vacancy, but something more deliberate, like he was paying attention to everything in the room simultaneously and just not making a production of it. His name tag said Stanley. He came to refill her water glass, which he had done twice already, and as he leaned in to pour, he said something. Quietly. So quietly that at first she thought she had misheard him. "She's the one," he said. "Don't leave." Gloria looked up at him. Stanley straightened, water pitcher in hand, and for one brief second met her eyes. His were steady, dark blue, calm, completely serious. And then he stepped back and moved to the next table, smooth as anything, as if he had said nothing at all. Gloria sat very still. Her first thought was that a waiter had just spoken to her, like they knew her personally, which was unusual. Her second thought was that the words were odd, not "please don't leave" or "your date is on his way back," but "she's the one," spoken like a line from a conversation she had not been part of. Her third thought arrived slower and carried more weight. He had said it urgently, not flirtatiously, not hopefully, with a quiet, controlled urgency that made the back of her neck prickle. She put her purse down. She could not have explained why. Exactly. Gloria Weber was not a woman who took instructions from strangers. She had not stayed in her seat because a waiter told her to. She stayed because something in those 3 words had landed in that same quiet instinct that told her to sit with her back to walls and run background checks on blind dates. And that instinct was now screaming at her in a register she had never heard it used before. Julian came back 2 minutes later. His jacket was on. He was relaxed. He apologized for the delay and asked if she had looked at the menu for dessert. She said yes and picked something she did not want and spent the next 40 minutes doing what she was genuinely extraordinary at, which was holding a conversation with a significant portion of her attention somewhere else entirely. She watched Stanley. He moved the room efficiently, professionally, without a single unnecessary motion. But 3 times over the course of the next hour, she caught him looking toward the front entrance. Not anxiously, calmly, like he was tracking something. And once, when a man in a gray coat came in and sat at the bar, a man Gloria had no particular reason to notice, except that she noticed everything. She saw Stanley's posture shift, just barely. His shoulders dropped a fraction. He turned back to his tables. Gloria excused herself to visit the powder room at 9:45. In the hallway near the kitchen, Stanley was standing with an empty tray, and he was not pretending to be doing something with it. He was waiting for her. "You need to hear something," he said, low and direct, the please and thank you waiter voice entirely gone. "The man you're with tonight is not who you think he is. When dinner ends, do not walk to your car alone. Tell your driver to pull up to the main entrance, not the side lot. The main entrance under the lights, in front of the valet." Gloria looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" she said. "Because the man in the gray coat at the bar has been watching your table for an hour, and he's not drinking his drink," Stanley said. "And Julian Marsh works for Nexer Capital, which is a front-holding company for a man named Richard Calloway, who's been trying to acquire Weber Global for 8 months, and who stopped being polite about it approximately 3 months ago." The name Richard Calloway hit her like cold water. She knew that name. She knew it in the way you know the name of something you have been carefully not looking at directly, The way you know the shape of a threat you have not yet been able to prove. Who are you? She said. It was not quite a question. Someone who has been watching the situation for a while. He said, right now I need you to trust me enough to go back to your table, finish dinner, and let me get you out of here safely. Can you do that? Gloria Weber had built a $3 billion company from a 2-room office in Baltimore. She had survived a hostile takeover attempt, a SEC inquiry that turned out to be entirely spurious, and a business partner who stole for $1 million and fled to Portugal. She had excellent instincts and a very low tolerance for being managed. She looked at this man, this waiter, with his square shoulders and his serious eyes and his complete absence of any of the usual social performance, and she made a decision. Yes, she said, I can do that. She went back to the table. She finished dinner. She laughed at 2 of Julian's jokes, which did not deserve it. She declined dessert. When Julian suggested they get a nightcap somewhere, she told him she had an early call and could not possibly stay out late, and she said it with such warmth that he walked her to the entrance of the restaurant looking like he was already planning the second date. Her driver, Marcus, was at the main entrance when she stepped out. Lights, valet, exactly as instructed. She got in without breaking stride. As the car pulled away, she looked back through the rear window. Stanley was standing at the edge of the lit entrance, watching the car go. He raised one hand slightly, not a wave, just an acknowledgement, and then turned back inside. Gloria took out her phone and opened her background check app. She searched Julian Marsh, Nexer Capital, and Richard Calloway in that order. By the time she got home, she had not slept, and she had about 40 questions, and the most pressing one was, who on earth was Stanley McCoy, and why had a restaurant waiter just run what appeared to be a counter-surveillance operation on her behalf? The answer to that question was going to change everything she thought she understood about the last 8 months of her life. But she did not know that yet. What she knew, sitting at her kitchen table at midnight with her laptop open and her tea going cold, was that Julian had lied to her about almost everything. His VC firm had Nexer Capital as a silent backer. Nexer Capital's parent company was a holding group with a Luxembourg registration and a paper trail that looped back, after 3 corporate layers, to Richard Calloway, the man who had been quietly trying to buy Weber Global for 8 months, the man who had made 2 direct acquisition offers, both of which she had declined, and who had gone quiet in a way that had made her more nervous, not less. Her date tonight had not been a date. It had been reconnaissance. She sat with that for a while. Then she opened a new search window and typed in Stanley McCoy. She found very little. A LinkedIn profile with no photo and 3 past employers, 2 of which she could not independently verify. A single article from 7 years ago in a small Maryland paper. A brief mention of a local fundraiser. A man named Stanley McCoy listed among the donors. A real estate record showing a purchase of a 2-bedroom apartment in the Creston neighborhood, which was a quiet residential area about 12 minutes from the restaurant, for a man who had just demonstrated, in the space of 1 evening, an ability to identify surveillance operatives and trace corporate shell companies across 3 jurisdictions. There was almost nothing findable about him online. Almost nothing findable meant someone very deliberate had made it that way. Gloria closed her laptop. She sat in her kitchen in the dark for a long time. Then she wrote a note to herself that said, find out who he is before you trust him any further. And beneath that, in smaller letters, but also, he was right about everything. She went back to Maison Delacroix the next evening. She told herself this was professional. She needed information. She needed to understand what she was dealing with, and the man who had the clearest picture of it, clearer, apparently, than her own security team, which was an uncomfortable thought she was saving for later, was a waiter at French Bistro on Whitmore and Fifth. She was not going back because she was curious about him personally. She was going back because she had a company to protect. This was mostly true. She sat at the bar this time, not her usual corner table, and ordered the sparkling water again. Stanley appeared within about 4 minutes. He did not look surprised to see her. He did not look anything in particular, which she was starting to understand was its own kind of expression. I need to talk to you, she said. I know, he said. I get off at 10. He lived 12 minutes away, as her research had suggested. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that was clean and modest and entirely without pretension. He held the door and she walked in, and Gloria Weber, who had been in penthouse offices in government buildings and a private island belonging to a Scandinavian shipping magnate, stopped in a hallway and simply stared. The living room looked like a normal living room. Sofa, coffee table, a bookshelf with actual books on it, a small TV. There was a child's drawing pinned to the refrigerator. She could see through the kitchen doorway. Bright crayon colors, a lopsided house with smoke coming out of the chimney. On the coffee table, there was a small toy excavator and a library book about dinosaurs. But here was the thing. On the far wall, behind a door that stood slightly open, she could see the edge of something that did not belong in a quiet residential apartment. A rack of servers, slim and dark, with tiny green lights blinking in the dim. The corner of a second monitor. The arm of a chair that was not a living room chair. It was an ergonomic work chair, the kind that costs $1,000 and is designed for people who spend 12 hours a day sitting in it. "You have children," she said. "A son," Stanley said. "Toby. He's 6. He's at my neighbor's tonight." A pause. "He thinks I'm a waiter." "You're not a waiter." "I'm also a waiter," he said. "Right now, it's the right place to be." He made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table and watched him and waited, because she had learned that the most effective way to get information from someone was usually to stop asking for it and let them decide when to give it. He brought 2 mugs, sat down across from her, and looked at her with those calm, dark blue eyes. "My name is Stanley McCoy," he said. "Until 5 years ago, I was a senior analyst and tactical coordinator for a classified cyber intelligence division that I am legally not allowed to name. I spent 11 years there. My work involved identifying and neutralizing corporate and political espionage operations. I was good at it." He said this the way you say the weather was good last Tuesday. "Factually, without inflation. 5 years ago, my wife died," he said. "Her name was Marie. She was a teacher. 3rd grade. He looked at the coffee mug. It was ruled an accident. A car accident on Route 9. Black ice, the whole story. I believed it for about 6 months. Then I started looking more carefully. Gloria was very still. Marie had nothing to do with my work," he said. "She didn't know what I did. Not really. But I had recently flagged an operation involving a private intelligence contractor called Holloway Group. They were doing corporate espionage work for several clients, including a man named Richard Calloway." He looked up at her. "I flagged the operation. My report went up the chain. 2 months later, my wife died on Route 9, and 3 weeks after that, my report was quietly buried and Holloway Group got a new contract with a government-adjacent firm." The room was very quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a clock ticked. "You think they killed her?" Gloria said. "I know they killed her," he said, without any drama. "I have spent 4 years and most of my savings confirming it. I can't prove it in a court of law yet, but I know it." Gloria looked at him for a long time. She thought about what it would mean to know something that completely, without being able to do anything about it. She thought about the child's drawing on the refrigerator. "So, why are you watching over me?" she said. "Because 8 months ago, Richard Calloway's people started making moves on Weber Global," Stanley said. "And I have been monitoring Calloway for 4 years. When his firm started targeting yours, I started paying attention to you. And when Holloway Group got involved," he paused. "Holloway Group doesn't do friendly acquisitions. They don't run polite corporate pressure. They get involved when the target needs to be removed or neutralized, not acquired." "Neutralized," Gloria repeated. "You," he said, steady as a wall, "were never going to be bought out. You were going to be discredited, or you were going to be made to disappear. Your company was going to be taken in the aftermath." She looked at him. She looked at the server rack blinking in the next room. She looked at the dinosaur book on the coffee table. "How long have you been at that restaurant?" she said. 6 weeks, he said. "It took me a while to narrow down which venue they'd use for the approach. Julian Marsh has run 4 similar operations in the past 2 years, always in upscale restaurants, always a fake social introduction. Once I identified him as Calloway's operative, I applied for a job at the 3 most likely locations." "You applied for a job as a waiter," she said, "to run surveillance." "It's good cover," he said. "You're invisible. You have reason to be near any table, and no one looks at you twice." He paused. Marie used to say, I was very good at being overlooked. She meant it as a joke. She knew how to say uncomfortable truths and make them sound like compliments. There was a grief in that sentence that he did not put there on purpose. It was just there. Gloria felt it like a draft from an open window. The man in the gray coat at the bar, she said. Last night. Contracted driver, Stanley said. He was supposed to follow your car when you left. If you'd gone to the side lot, which is where the valet would normally have taken you, you would have walked past him on the way to your car. There were two more in the lot. What were they going to do? She said. I don't know exactly, he said. Taking you somewhere. Gotten your phone and your laptop. Given Calloway's team access to whatever was on them. He looked at her. Maybe more than that. I ain't gonna find out. Gloria sat with that. She sat with the entirety of the previous 24 hours and everything she had found in her research and everything this man was now telling her, and she ran it through the part of her brain that had kept the company running through a financial crisis and a pandemic and two hostile negotiations. The part that sorted facts from noise and threat from inconvenience. And she arrived at a very clear conclusion. She was in genuine danger. Not metaphorical, professional. My reputation might take a hit. Danger. Real danger. And her security team had not caught it. And her lawyers had not caught it. And the person who had caught it was a former intelligence operative who was currently employed as a waiter and who was doing all of this, as far as she could tell, because the same man who wanted her company had killed his wife, and he was not done with Richard Calloway yet. What do you need from me? She said. He looked at her, and for the first time something shifted in that steady expression. Not much. A slight recalibration, like she had said something he had not quite expected. I need access to your internal communications for the last 8 months, he said. If Calloway has a mole inside Weber Global, and I believe he does, there will be traces. I can find them. And I need your cooperation for what comes next. What comes next? She said. Your board meets in 9 days, he said. Calloway's people are going to bring something to that meeting. Something damaging. Evidence of financial irregularities, manufactured or selectively framed. I'm not sure which yet. If it lands, your board will be pressured to vote on an emergency management restructure. Under the restructure, Calloway's proxies step in, they get access to the company's financial systems, and it's over. He paused. I need 9 days to be ready to stop that. Gloria looked at him. She thought about 9 days. She thought about a board meeting and manufactured evidence, and a man who had been planning this for the better part of a year. She thought about Toby, asleep at a neighbor's house, who thought his father was a waiter. Okay, she said. He blinked, just slightly. You're sure, he said. You kept me from walking into a parking lot tonight, she said. You spent 6 weeks eating shift meals and pretending to be invisible to protect a woman you don't know. You have a server rack behind a toy chest. She looked at him steadily. I've made bigger decisions on less. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'll need a secure access token to your internal server. I can walk you through creating one that won't flag in your system. Fine, she said. I'll need a direct contact number, not email. Fine, he said. She stayed another 2 hours. She did not mean to, but he started walking her through what he had found in the past 8 months. The shell companies, the proxy investors, the patterns of communication that pointed toward a mole in her organization. And it was like watching someone assemble a puzzle she had been staring at without seeing. He spoke clearly, without jargon, pointing to the data rather than editorializing it. He answered her questions directly. She realized somewhere around midnight, the clearest thinker she had sat across from in years. Before she left, she stopped in the hallway and looked back at the living room, the toy excavator on the coffee table, the library book about dinosaurs, the crayon drawing on the refrigerator. How old was Toby when she died? She said. 13 months, Stanley said. She nodded once. She did not say anything because there was nothing adequate to say, and she had a feeling Stanley McCoy did not want adequate. He had been living with inadequate for 4 years. She went home. She set up the access token. She sent him the details through a secure messaging app he had specified, and then she sat in her quiet apartment, which was very well decorated and very large and very empty, and she thought about a third-grade teacher named Marie and a little boy who thought his father was a waiter and a man with callous hands who had been carrying a 4-year war in his chest without ever putting it down. She thought about all of that for a long time before she went to sleep. Listen, if you're still here, it means you're invested. You want to see what happens next. But here's the reality. Most people watch stories like this and scroll away without subscribing. They enjoy it, then vanish. If this story actually matters to you, if you genuinely care about how it ends, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. Otherwise, you'll probably forget this channel exists and miss all the other incredible stories I share. The 9 days were not quiet. Stanley called her, always on the secure app, always concise, every morning between 6 and 6:15. She had not asked him to do this. He had simply started doing it. And she had not told him to stop, because the calls had become, she admitted only to herself, the most useful part of her morning. He reported what he found overnight in her systems and what it meant and what he needed from her, and she responded and then spent the rest of her day acting as if she did not know what she knew. This was the hardest part. She was good at keeping things close, but knowing that someone inside her own organization was feeding information to Richard Calloway, and she now knew it was someone because the data patterns Stanley had found were unmistakable. While having to smile at them in meetings and copy them on emails was a specific kind of controlled agony that she would not wish on anyone. On day 3, Stanley identified the mole. His name was Derek Sue, and he was Weber Global's deputy chief financial officer, and he had been with the company for 4 years, and Gloria had promoted him personally, and she had once sent him a very nice gift basket when his daughter was born. This information arrived via a brief message on the secure app that said, "It's Derek Sue. I'm attaching the evidence. He's been passing financial data for 6 months." And then there was a file attached, and the file was 37 pages long, and every page was worse than the last. She read the whole thing in her car in the parking structure of her building at 10:45 at night, and she did not cry, because she was not going to cry, but she sat there for a long time after she finished reading, and stared at the concrete wall in front of her. Then she called Stanley. "I need a plan," she said, "for exactly what to do with Derek that doesn't tip off Calloway before the board meeting." "I have one," Stanley said. "How are you doing?" It was not a standard question. It was direct and quiet, and it caught her slightly off guard. "I'm fine," she said. "You promoted him," Stanley said. "You trusted him. That's a harder thing to sit with than a stranger betraying you." She was quiet for a moment. "You have a way of saying the accurate thing very simply," she said. "It's a skill from my previous job," he said. "You don't have room for speeches in the field." She laughed. She had not meant to. It was a short, slightly exhausted laugh, but it was real, and she heard him exhale quietly on the other end of the line, which she thought might have been something close to a laugh of his own. "Tell me the plan," she said. The plan was elegant. Derek was to receive, in the normal course of business, a set of financial documents that contained 3 deliberately incorrect figures. Errors small enough to be plausible, specific enough to be traceable. If those figures showed up in Calloway's presentation to the board, which Stanley was now 90% certain was a mechanism of attack, the source would be undeniable. Derek would not know the documents were marked. He would pass them, as he'd been passing everything, and the trap would close around him at the moment he thought he was helping destroy her. On day 5, Toby got sick. Gloria knew this because Stanley missed her 6 a.m. call, which had never happened, and sent a message at 7:59 saying, "Sorry, Toby had a fever overnight. Back shortly." She had sat at her desk for 20 minutes staring at the message before she typed back, "Is he okay?" And Stanley had replied, "He's fine. Just a cold." He's dramatic about it, which is apparently genetic. And Gloria had laughed at that too, at her desk with her coffee going cold, and told herself she was simply relieved that the child was okay and nothing more complicated than that. On day 7, she found herself describing Toby's dinosaur book to her assistant Priya, who listened to this with an expression of deepest professional neutrality before saying carefully, "You've been to his apartment." And Gloria had said, "It's a working relationship," with such finality that Priya had said only of course and moved on to the day's schedule, but she had done it with a small, indestructible smile. Day 8 was bad. Calloway's lawyers contacted her board chair directly with a preliminary document, a regulatory concern memo, they called it, which was a piece of fiction that would have been almost impressive in its fabrication if it had not been designed to end her career. It alleged a pattern of financial misreporting going back 3 years. The figures were selectively extracted from real documents, taken out of context and reframed. Alone, without context, they looked damning. With context, they were nothing. But the board meeting was tomorrow, and the memo had been delivered tonight, and 3 of her board members had already sent her messages asking for explanations. She called Stanley. "I've seen it," he said, before she could speak. "I've had it for 4 hours. I'm ready. They've sent it to the board," she said. "I know. I need you to send me one thing. The authorizing minutes from the Q3 operational restructure in 2021. Page 43 of the board record. That single document demolishes 2/3 of their filing." She got it to him in 8 minutes. She did not ask how he already had the filing. She had stopped asking how he already had things on about day 4. "Get some sleep," he said. "I won't be able to sleep," she said. "I know," he said, "but sit somewhere comfortable anyway. And eat something. You haven't eaten since lunch." She was standing in her kitchen when he said this. She looked around the kitchen. "How do you possibly know that?" she said. "You sound like you haven't eaten since lunch," he said. "It's a tone. I've heard it a lot." "From who?" she said. A pause. "From me," he said. "After Marie. I forgot to eat a lot that first year." She stood in the kitchen and did not say anything for a moment. "I'll make some toast," she said. "Good," he said. And then quietly, "You're going to win tomorrow." She made the toast. She sat on her couch and ate it and tried to sleep, and she did eventually, for about 4 hours, which was honestly more than she had expected. The board meeting was at 9 a.m. in the glass panel conference room on the 42nd floor of the Weber Global building on Commerce Street. Gloria was there at 8:15, which was standard. Her board members filed in between 8:30 and 9. Her lawyers were there. Her CFO, not Derek, her actual CFO, a woman named Pamela who knew nothing about any of this and who was about to have a very interesting day, was there. Callaway's people were not supposed to be in the room. This was an internal board meeting. But Julian Marsh was there, which she had expected. He had apparently acquired standing as a potential investor several months ago, one of Callaway's long game moves, and her board chair had agreed to let him attend as an observer. He sat in one of the side chairs with the polished ease of someone who believed he had already won and was simply here to watch it happen. He looked at Gloria when she sat down and gave her the slow smile of a man with a full hand. She smiled back, smaller, steadier. The meeting opened. Standard order of business. Financials, operational updates, the routine machinery of a billion-dollar company going through its scheduled motions. And then, 40 minutes in, Julian Marsh leaned forward and said he had a matter to raise under new business, and the board chair, professionally obligated to allow it, gave him the floor. Julian was smooth. She would give him that. He walked the board through the regulatory concern memo with the pacing of a man who had practiced it, which he had. He expressed grave concern. He cited figures. He said the word "unfortunately" with considerable sincerity. 2 of the board members were visibly uncomfortable. One was taking notes. The board chair was holding a very careful expression. Julian finished. The room was quiet for a moment. Then the conference room door opened. He was wearing a suit, not a waiter's uniform, not a server's apron. A dark suit, charcoal gray, well-fitted, no tie. He carried a tablet in one hand and a thin folder in the other, and he walked into the room with the same quality of stillness she had noticed the very first time she saw him. That particular calm that was not absence of motion, but complete command of it. He did not look like a waiter. He did not look like several things she had initially assumed about him. He looked, she thought, exactly like what he was, which was one of the most capable people in the room, and quite possibly in the building, and she had a feeling that was a sentence that would have been true in most buildings, most places. "I apologize for the interruption," Stanley said, and his voice in this room, with its acoustics, without the white noise of a restaurant, was clear and measured and completely unhurried. "I'm here as a technical consultant, engaged by Ms. Weber, to review the documentation referenced in the regulatory concern memo. I have some findings the board should hear before any vote is taken." Julian Marsh looked at him. Julian Marsh went very still. "This meeting is not open to," Julian began. "I have standing as a retained technical expert," Stanley said. He placed the folder on the table. I'll be brief. He was brief. He was extraordinarily brief. He took 12 minutes, and in those 12 minutes he walked the board through exactly how the figures in Julian's memo had been extracted, what they omitted, what the Q3 operational restructure minutes established, and what the metadata of the documents Calloway's firm had prepared revealed about their origins. He did not editorialize. He did not raise his voice. He presented data the way he had presented it to Gloria in his kitchen, clearly, specifically, without unnecessary decoration, and he watched the room as he did it with those calm eyes that were paying attention to everything at once. By minute 9, 2 board members had stopped taking notes and started reading the documents he had provided. By minute 11, the board chair's expression had shifted from careful neutrality to something sharper. By minute 12, when Stanley placed the final document on the table, a trace communication thread connecting Julian Marsh's recent activity to a Holloway Group contractor, and said quietly, I can also tell board that the Deputy CFO, Derek Sue, has been materially involved in the preparation and passage of these documents. The room went very silent. Julian Marsh stood up. He said something about legal action, about defamation, about this not being over. He said it with the volume of a man who had lost but had not yet processed it. Stanley looked at him without any particular expression. Gloria looked at him with the specific kind of calm she had perfected over 15 years of doing this. The calm that said, this room, this building, this company is mine, and you do not belong here. Julian left. He did not slam the door because he had too much professional composure for that, but it was a near thing. The board chair looked at Gloria. Then he looked at Stanley. Then he said, slowly, I think we need to take 30 minutes. They took 45. When they came back, the regulatory concern memo was tabled indefinitely. Derek Sue's access had been suspended pending an internal investigation, and 2 board members had suggested, without irony, that perhaps Ms. Weber's security and intelligence infrastructure warranted a serious review and upgrade. Gloria thanked the board. She waited until the room had cleared. Then she looked at Stanley, who was collecting the folder from the table with the same unhurried efficiency he had used to refill her water glass, and she said, You were remarkable. He looked at her. Something moved in his expression, briefly. You built the thing worth protecting, he said. I just protected it. She was quiet for a moment. How's Toby? She said. Cold's gone, he said. He declared victory this morning. Made me give him extra dinosaur nuggets to celebrate. She laughed. That's very appropriate for a person who has a library book about dinosaurs. He's going to be a paleontologist or a general, Stanley said. There is no in-between with Toby. They stood in the empty conference room on the 42nd floor. The city spread out wide and gray and winter bright through the glass walls, and for a moment neither of them said anything, and the silence was not uncomfortable. It was something else. Something that had not had a name until now, and was only just beginning to acquire one. Come on, Gloria said. I'll buy you a coffee. A real one, not from the restaurant. I know a good place, he said. I bet you do, she said. You've been mapping this neighborhood for 6 weeks. 7, actually, he said, and almost smiled. 3 days after the board meeting, Gloria was in her office at 7 in the morning. She was always in her office at 7 in the morning. This was not unusual. When her phone buzzed with a message from Stanley on the secure app. It said, Can we meet tonight? Not work-related. There's something I should have told you from the beginning. She read it twice. She set her phone down. She picked it up again. She typed back, My apartment, 7 o'clock. I'll cook. There was a pause. Then, you cook? She typed. I'm outstanding at 3 things and mediocre at most others. Cooking is one of the 3. Another pause. Then, what are the other 2? She smiled at her phone in a way that she was deeply grateful no one could see. Running a company, she typed. And knowing when to trust someone. She put the phone down and went back to work. She cooked pasta. It was a carbonara, which was one of those dishes that looked simple and was not. And the doing of it was satisfying the way that precise things are satisfying, the way a well-run meeting is satisfying, or a contract that says exactly what it means. She had a bottle of white wine open on the counter. She had changed out of her work clothes, which was something she virtually never did when she was working from home in the evenings, and she was not examining that decision too closely. Stanley arrived at 7 on the dot. He had changed too. Dark jeans, a simple gray shirt, no tie, and he looked different in her apartment than he had in the restaurant or in his own space. Not uncomfortable, just calibrated differently. The way a person looks when they are paying attention to being somewhere rather than working it. He looked at the apartment when she let him in, taking in the way he took in everything, which was efficiently and without pretense. "It's very clean," he said. "I don't own a lot of things," she said. "I've never been home enough to accumulate them." "I have the opposite problem," he said. "Toby accumulates things on behalf of us both." She poured wine and finished the pasta, and they sat at her dining table, which was a table she had owned for 4 years and used almost exclusively for working, and ate and talked about things that were not Richard Calloway or Derek Sue or surveillance operations. She asked about Toby, and Stanley talked about his son with a quiet, undisguised love that she found hard to look at directly, the way you find hard to look at something very bright. He asked about her company, not the crisis of the past 9 days, but the beginning of it, how she had built it, what it looked like in that 2-room office in Baltimore. And she talked about that more freely than she had talked about in years, because he asked the way someone asks when they are genuinely curious rather than impressively curious, and there was a difference she had become very attuned to. After dinner, she made coffee and they moved to the living room, and she said, "Okay, the thing you needed to tell me." He held the coffee mug with both hands. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at her. "My background in cyber intelligence," he said. "I told you I worked for a classified division for 11 years. "You did," she said. "What I didn't tell you," he said, "was what I did after I left. After Marie died, I resigned. I had resources, savings, clearance contacts, skills, and I had a 4-year-old and a rage I had to do something disciplined with or it was going to eat me." He paused. "I started a private intelligence and security consultancy. Very small, very selective. I took cases involving corporate espionage, mostly because that was my area. I built it slowly and kept it quiet because quiet was the point. Gloria was listening with the specific quality of attention she brought to things that mattered. The firm grew," he said. "I brought in 2 other former analysts. We took on larger cases. We are good at it." He set the mug down on the coffee table. 3 years ago, I was looking for a strategic partner. Someone with enough capital and standing in the corporate world to give us institutional cover. I found a company that was the right shape, the right values. I looked at it for a long time before I approached it. Gloria was quiet. "The company was Weber Global Logistics," Stanley said. "I made a private minority investment through a holding structure. I didn't want it known. I didn't want my operational work and my investment to be connected. I am," he said, meeting her eyes directly, "your largest individual shareholder outside of your own stake. I have been for 22 months. The room was very quiet. Gloria looked at him. She was very good at processing information while not allowing the processing to show on her face, which was a skill that had taken years to develop and which she was now employing at full capacity. "You own part of my company," she said. "Yes," he said. "You have owned part of my company for 22 months. "Yes," he said. "And when Calloway started making moves on Weber Global," she said, "you are not just monitoring him because of Marie. You were also protecting your own investment." "Yes," he said. And then, "But that's not the reason I took a job as a waiter for 7 weeks." She looked at him. "I could have tipped off your security team," he said. "I could have sent an anonymous alert. I could have hired someone else to run the surveillance. I have the means for all of that." He looked at her steadily. "I took the job myself because I had spent 22 months watching how you ran that company, and I had read every interview you'd ever given, and I had looked at every decision you'd made in a crisis, and I wanted to know if the person in those records was the person who actually existed." He paused. "I wanted to see what you were like when things went wrong, whether you panicked, whether you made bad calls under pressure, whether the steadiness I'd seen in your professional record was real or was just good PR. And," she said, "you sat across from a man who was lying to you for 40 minutes and never let on that you knew," he said. "You went back to that restaurant the next night instead of going straight to your lawyers because you wanted information first. You read 37 pages of evidence about Derek Sue in a parking garage at midnight, and the first thing you did was call me and ask for a plan. You were scared, and you did not let the fear make you stupid. He looked at her. You are exactly who the records said you were. Gloria was quiet for a long moment. I have several questions, she said. I know, he said. First, she said, why didn't you tell me you were a shareholder when we started working together? Because if I had, he said, you would have immediately questioned everything I told you, whether I was protecting you or protecting my investment, whether my information was honest or managed. The fact that I had a financial stake would have been noise and everything else, and I needed you to be able to hear the everything else clearly. She considered that. It was, she acknowledged quietly, correct. Second, she said, what were you planning to do if I turned out to be different from what the record said? If I had panicked or made bad calls, or turned out to be someone other than the person you'd assessed? He was quiet for a moment. Then I would have quietly divested my stake and moved on, he said, and you would never have known I existed. But I would have been in danger, she said. I would have still made sure you were safe, he said. That would have been separate from the rest of it. She looked at him. She believed that. She was not sure she could fully explain why she believed it, except that she had spent 9 days in close operational contact with this person, and she had yet to find a single gap between what he said and what he did. Third, she said, and her voice was different now, quieter. You said you wanted to see if I was who the record said I was. What were you hoping to find? Not professionally. Personally. He looked at her for a long moment. Someone, he said carefully, like a man who was being precise because precision mattered, who was as alone in the successful version of her life as I've been in mine. Someone who had built something extraordinary, and then looked up one day and found that the building had taken everything. Someone who might, he stopped, started again. Toby asks me sometimes if I have a friend. Not colleagues, not contacts, a friend. Someone I talk to the way his friend Marcus talks to him, which is apparently very loudly about dinosaurs and excavators. He paused. I've not been able to answer that question for 4 years. The apartment was very quiet. Outside, somewhere, a car passed on the street below. The refrigerator hummed. Gloria thought about her kitchen table, where she ate cold noodles alone at 11 p.m. on Tuesdays. She thought about the last time she had laughed at something and meant it. She thought about a 6-year-old who declared victory over a cold and rewarded himself with dinosaur nuggets. I can answer for him, she said slowly, if you want, if you think he'd be okay with that. Stanley looked at her. Something in his face did very quietly, completely, the way a door opens into a room that has been shut for a long time. He'd have opinions, he said. He'd want to know if you like dinosaurs. I know nothing about dinosaurs, Gloria said, but I'm an extremely fast learner. He'll test you on that, Stanley said. He takes it seriously. I take things seriously too, she said. It's one of my better qualities. He smiled. It was a real smile, not a performance of one, not the muted, almost smile she had seen a few times before. A real one that went all the way to his eyes and made him look less like a man carrying a 4-year war and more like a man who had just set something down that was very heavy and found his hands unexpectedly free. There is one more thing, she said. There's always one more thing, he said. You're a shareholder, she said. If you're going to be involved in Weber Global in any official capacity going forward, which presumably you are now that we've had this conversation, we're going to have to disclose your stake and deal with the governance implications. I know, he said. My lawyers are going to have a great deal to say, she said. I know, he said. And my board is going to have questions. I'm used to answering questions, he said. Not from Harriet Langford, Gloria said. She is the most relentless questioner I have ever encountered, and I have met heads of state. I'll manage, Stanley said. You say that now, she said. You haven't met Harriet yet. He laughed. Properly, this time. It was a good sound. She thought she would like to hear more. They sat there a while longer, and the conversation moved easily between the heavy things and the lighter ones, between Richard Calloway, who was currently the subject of a very quiet, very serious investigation that Stanley had set in motion with his former contacts, the kind that would not move quickly but would not stop either, and Toby's recent project of building a model of the solar system out of craft foam and determination, and the corporate governance mess they were now going to have. to navigate together, and the wine, which was not quite finished. At 10:15, Stanley said he needed to get back. Neighbor's curfew for Toby. He said it with a particular kind of care of someone who has never missed a curfew and does not intend to. Gloria walked him to the door. "The restaurant," she said. "Maison Delacroix. Are you keeping the job?" "For now," he said, "until Calloway's situation resolves. It remains a useful position." "Right," she said. "They do make excellent carbonara," he said, "though I'm told yours is better." "Mine is better," she said. "I don't say that lightly." He stood at her door with his jack in his hand and looked at her, and there was nothing hidden in it, nothing managed or considered or deployed. Just a man looking at a woman he had been paying attention to for 22 months, who had turned out to be exactly who he'd hoped she was, at a door in a well-lit hallway in an apartment full of very little furniture and a great deal of earned, hard-won, quietly extraordinary life. "Gloria," he said. "Stanley," she said. "Thank you for dinner," he said. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting me walk to my car." He almost smiled. Full stop. Actual smile right at the end. "Any time," he said. He went. She closed the door. She stood in her hallway for a moment, hand still on the doorknob, and she thought about all the ways the last 9 days had rearranged the landscape of things she thought she understood about her life, about danger and trust, and what it meant to be seen by someone who had done the research. She went back to the kitchen. She finished the wine. She looked at her dining table, which she had used tonight for eating instead of working, and thought that was not a bad change. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and governance questions, and a board to brief, and a deputy CFO to formally investigate, and a corporate espionage case to hand off to the appropriate authorities. There would be the unglamorous, necessary, important work of repairing the places that had been quietly damaged while she was not looking. But tonight there was this: a table that had been used for dinner, and a problem that had been solved, and a man who had told her the truth in the most roundabout, methodical, utterly characteristic way imaginable. And somewhere across town, a 6-year-old who was probably asleep by now, one small hand curled around a plastic excavator, dreaming of dinosaurs. Gloria Weber smiled at her kitchen. She thought that was, all things considered, not a bad place to be. The story of Gloria and Stanley teaches us that the most dangerous threats in life rarely announce themselves loudly. They come dressed as opportunity, charm, and friendly faces. Gloria was a brilliant woman, but her biggest vulnerability was not her enemies. It was her blind spots. She almost walked into a trap because she was looking at the obvious problem, which was Julian, and missing the bigger picture around her. Stanley, on the other hand, teaches us that real strength is not always loud or visible. He was the most powerful person in that restaurant, and nobody knew it. He also shows us that purpose and pain can either destroy you or sharpen you. He took the worst thing that ever happened to him and turned it into a discipline that eventually saved someone else's life. Together, they remind us of something simple but easy to forget. The person who seems beneath you might be the one protecting you. The person impressing you might be the one robbing you. And the life you are too busy building might be the very thing blocking you from the people and partnerships that could make it mean something. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My friend said I wouldn't even reach 10,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. And here's what I need to know. Do you want part 2?